Here we are. People are jumping into the room. I'm seeing names pop in. Joel has a very nice art piece behind him as folks are joining in. Uh, Folks, so glad you're here. If you're joining us, click your chat button and tell us where you're coming from today. I see Chris Duda in the room. I see Craig and Elle, James, Jane, Jim, Jeremy. So many J names. Jody, Josh. Uh, Kent's here. Kent, how you doing, man? We just met on LinkedIn this week, and you're joining. So glad to see you. Katrina's here. Oh, Katrina, we were just sounding a couple weeks ago. Let us know where you guys are joining in from, where you're coming from today. Tyler's joining from Bozeman, building a super cool bathhouse there. We have Gibson, BC represented. We have all the way in the Lakes District in England, one of my favorite places. Tom's here from New York City, Hudson, Wisconsin. Joel, they're joining from all over the world to hear you talk about commercial design. How fun is that, huh?
That's very fun. I see Todd Dubois is in Northern California, which is where I also am right now.
Yeah, Joel and I have been, well, we're getting going here. Joel and I gave each other one high five in the last week together in person because we've been all over the place. Joel's currently delivering a sauna to Northern California. And I was in Finland learning about the forests and wood industry last week. So usually we're sitting desks away from each other and Joel's putting his earbuds in because I'm really loud. Now he's got plenty of distance between, and here I am, Joel, still loud in your ears. You
That's
just
right.
can't
Can't
can't get away
escape
from
you.
it. You guys, so glad you're here and so glad you're joining from all over. We see Buffalo, New York, Martha's Vineyard, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Nova Scotia, Canada, Alberta, Canada, all over the place. So glad you're here. We are talking today. Let me do some intro stuff because we got a lot to cover. And we're going to have more folks just joining as we go. But thank you guys for being here. This is one of our monthly Cedar and Stone webinars where we kind of dive into all things commercial sauna, helping you, giving you the tips, strategies, tricks to how do you launch a business? How do you launch a business well? How do you make those businesses profitable? What's happening in the world and the market around all things thermic bathing, sauna, cold plunge, all the good stuff. And today we're doing a big deep dive on commercial sauna design. So we're going to get into worst case scenarios, pitfalls and mistakes that we see all the time, the way people spend tens of thousands of dollars too much in areas that they shouldn't, and the way that we would suggest and maybe professionally recommend. Here's some things to think about. Drive in this direction. Before we dive into all that, I do want to say this is kind of the around the coffee table conversation. And so we want to hear your voice during this. We want to see your questions along the way. This is not just watching the YouTube, if you're watching the recording later. So let us know as we're going. We're not going to save a bunch of time at the end for Q&As. We're going to answer them throughout. So click the Q&A button, put any questions you have in there. We'll be able to filter them. And any comments, any thoughts, any really good, impactful quotes that you're going to write in your diary later that Joel said, also put in the chat window so everybody sees it, because we are so excited about kind of diving into this conversation together. Because it's interactive, we also want to know who's in the room. And Lindsay is going to send over a poll right now. We just want to get a sense where you're at in the industry and what you're up to here. So you should be seeing a poll. In what way are you interested in the business of sauna? Are you one you love supporting? You're an enthusiast. You're somebody who's in this room because you love the experience of this. Or maybe two, you're thinking about starting a sauna business. You're somewhere in the process of the doors aren't open yet to funding it, designing it. It's someday maybe you're going to do this thing and you're trying to get in the rooms with people like this. Or three, perhaps you are currently running. The doors are open and you're trying to make sure this thing keeps running. So tell us where you're at in those three. And as we're getting people to fill that out, I just do want to also introduce you more formally to Joel. Joel, so excited to have you here. Business partner. We are next to each other in so many areas of life. I was just hanging out with your family at a kid's birthday party last night that you weren't at because you were on some work
And that's
stuff, and
super sad that I missed it.
all of our kids were jumping in the pool together. Everybody survived. And you are one who loves Duluth, Minnesota just as much as I, and you've built a bunch of businesses here. And as our chief of innovation and design, you care so deeply about designing and building things. And so this conversation's like right in your sweet spot. Fun to get to share this conversation that we've been having for years together, now with a whole bunch of people
Hmm.
today. How are you feeling in a morning in Northern California?
Oh, I'm feeling great. Yesterday, I got to drive a sauna 4 miles up like a windy dirt track up into a canyon, which was uh, fun and beautiful and lightly exhausting. Uh, so I'm glad to be just relaxing today. Uh, but it's nice to be out in a beautiful part of the country.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, so glad everybody is here, and let's kind of dive in and hop into this bigger topic here, Joel, of commercial sound and design. And where I want to start is really sort of just before we get into the geeky details. I assume people are going to ask us a ton of technical questions on this call, which is great, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Talk to me first, Joel, about design broadly, kind of design thinking and how we think about commercial design, because this is different than the backyard sauna. This is different than something that is going to host a handful of people for an hour or two. We're really thinking about things in a pretty hefty HD kind of category when we're thinking about commercial design. Joel, what do you think about kind of start to paint the picture for us for what we need to be thinking about and these people need to be thinking about when it's commercial design oriented?
Yeah, I think coming into a problem like this, there's kind of three big areas. Uh, there's aesthetic, which of I apologize. Can you hear that dog? Uh, you can't. Great.
No, you're good.
Okay, there's aesthetic is sort of what we first think of when we think of design, and that obviously making a thing beautiful. Um, there's experience, which I think is what we think of when we're thinking about a residential sauna, which is how's it going to feel to be in here? What's that cycle going to be for me of hot and cold and rest and rehydrate? Um, and then there's also function. And in a commercial setting, this takes on special importance. How are people through the space? Where are they going to put their things? Uh, how when suddenly 8 people or 12 people or 50 people arrive at once, where are they going to stand? What actions are they going to take? And then how are they going to move through the space? So with those take on um, much more much more sort of strict importance. But those are kind of the aesthetic, the experience, and then the functional.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that, sometimes we have people approach us and it is all about beauty. It's all about aesthetics. It's all about how should it look and feel, which is important. I mean, we care so much about beauty and spaces matter and how they're designed matter. And what is less beautiful is people sort of standing awkwardly, fairly damp, trying to put their swimsuit on or off or waiting for other people. And so these how the space is used is truly important. And so we're trying to often give people a more expansive view of what are all the things you're trying to do. The architects would call that the program of the building. Uh, how are you trying to get people through that cycle of hot, cold, rest, rehydrate, repeat? Joel, talk about like, you've built a number of businesses and the commercial nature of them also comes with just the need for longevity in a space, not just the sort of flow of it looking nice day one, but the impact of that 6 months in to 6 years in. What have you found that you sort of need to be thinking about way sooner than you thought when you first built a number of spaces, now kind of decade plus into designing commercial spaces? What are those? Give people those kind of lenses to be asking right away.
Yeah, the concept that I like to think about is a concept called duty cycle. Um, I first encountered this around sort of industrial equipment. Like if, for an example, air compressors have a certain amount of air they put out, cubic feet per minute of air. And you can buy one air compressor that puts out 30 CFM and another, and one might be 10 times as much as the other. And it's like, well, what's the difference? And the difference is the duty cycle. So one might be intended to be run for 15 minutes out of every 6 hours, or for 5 minute stretches, or maybe for an hour out of a week. Um, and then one might be intended to be run literally 24 hours a day for years on end. Um, and you just need a different kind of beefiness. You need different considerations about maintainability, serviceability. Um, and so that the difference between a sauna in your backyard that maybe you use 2 or 3 times a week, you heat it up for an hour or two, you use it for an hour or two, and then it cools back down, versus one that's going to be 200 degrees, 12 hours a day, every day for years on end. It's an incredibly different experience for that building. Um, and so it needs to be designed very differently. Um, you need to think about that from a mechanical point of view. What kind of stove is in it? How is that stove sized? Uh, what does the wiring look like? What does the ventilation look like? And then also materials and finishes. You know, the what kind of wood is this? What are the finishes? Are they going to be able to hold up to this? So just like, you can buy a pancake compressor for 99 bucks at Home Depot and get yourself nailing with a nail gun. Um, or you can buy an Ingersoll Rand and have somebody nailing 24 hours a day for the next 10 years. You really have to understand which of those two products you're getting.
I I think the one that I like, and I'm gonna shout out to Tom, who's on this call here. Tom works in our education and commercial design for people. He's based out of New York, like works with everybody, and before that, worked in coffee. And I never see Tom more stressed out than when he's in a slow line in coffee. When he's in a Midwest coffee line, because he's from New York now. And the tool, the duty cycle tool, Joel, that gets that done is the commercial espresso machine. It's the thing that pulls multiple shots so consistently all day, every day, versus the slow espresso machine that's in your coffee, on your kitchen counter that will make maybe one nice shot in the morning or maybe a few for your family. But if you have a dinner party, it's going to be a half an hour to get everybody their, after dinner coffee beverage with their dessert. And that there's a very real duty cycle, there's a very real commercial application, and a very real cost to that usually. Those commercial espresso machines are 30K versus the one on your, countertop could be 300 to 1,000 bucks. So as we think about this for folks, those are some very key, sort of very broad stroke design principles. We have some folks given some feedback here in the chat. So I want to come back to that. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Todd. If you guys have questions, send them over to the Q&A window. We want to check them out there. But there's some good thoughts really happening right now. And that's one is safety. So Martin, you're bringing this one. Safety for customers is the number one item. I mean, I couldn't agree more that that is sort of as we start to build out a space, we're thinking about heat tolerances, distances to combustibles, compliance on a number of things. Joel, what are the sort of most common kind of first questions you're asking around safety when it comes to commercial sauna design? What are those initial things that if folks have, no awareness to it, what are you starting with?
Yeah. Um, some of it again, it is about that function, the how many people are going to be seated in a hot room at a time, how many people are going to be moving in a hot room at a time. Is there space for both of those things to happen? um, how are people protected from the stoves? How are people protected from where in a uh, wood-fired sauna, how are they protected from where the wood handling and the stoking of the stove needs to be? um, And then how can you signal to people the right places to be? So the obvious way is, well, you put a railing in front of it, right? And you do have to do that. But there's simpler things too. Like often in a sauna, you want people to sit in one area, but you want a different area to be kept open as the walkway or as where the stoves are managed. And sometimes we'll do something as similar as use a different flooring material for those two areas. And it just subconsciously tells people, oh, that's where the walking happens. This is where the stationary happens. Um, so there's little tricks like that that can sort of signal to people how the space is supposed to be used. Um, the other is to be really honest with yourself and with your business model and your builder about capacity. So this is a problem we run into all the time. Uh, People say, "Well, I get that's a seven-person sauna, but if people like each other, or if I create a communal atmosphere, I can stick more people in there." Um, and yeah, that's true. The problem is that you run into safety issues, and then you run into functional issues. Like one of the reasons it's really important to know your numbers going in, how many people you're going to have in there, how often, um, is that people have thermal mass. So when you're doing your calculation about how big is my stove, how many pounds of stones do I have in there, uh, how many windows do I have? Those are the what's my cubic volume. People think about all that stuff, but what they don't think about is, oh, 12 people, 12 cold people walking into the space is going to take a tremendous amount of is going to suck up a tremendous amount of heat, or the door being opened all the time, depending on the way that you're running your cycles. Whether it's sort of everyone in then everyone out, or it's like people cycling in and out and the doors opening all the time. um, those are areas where you can mess up your math because you weren't clear on how many people you're going to have in there. So for safety and for longevity, I think just making sure you really understand what your function is, how many people are coming in, how many people are going out, how often. That's really critical. And that allows you too to make sure that you have the safety thing covered. So you're not going to have, if you've got sort of a quasi seat up against the railing that, maybe your designer wasn't intending to be used, but now you are using all the time, well, you're exposing people to risk.
Yeah, and these things get really real when it's either quality or safety that gets impaired there. So, Joel, you brought up the putting all the bathers in the room and how that's sort of a heat sink. It's a real thing. It's like the moment when you're boiling your water to add noodles and then you drop your noodles in and it stops boiling. That's what can happen in the sauna. You have these big temperature fluctuations. And, most people they want a really hearty experience of heat. And especially if you're in a place that even has any sort of bent towards fitness. You're in a recovery sort of atmosphere. If your target market, if you're talking about recovery and muscles, they're hearing about I want to be in high heat because they're thinking sauna is more related to working out, like doing reps. And they've probably been listening to Joe Rogan and they've probably been hearing, okay, go really hard. Now, if you're in a big supportive commercial bathing space that's social, they also want sort of different varying temperatures and levels of heat. But you might be in a space where you have folks that, hey, they're just getting into sauna. They don't know that. They don't know what the temperatures that are sort of normal for them. And so some of this comes back to who's your target market? How many people are you trying to host a session? How many people are you trying to host a day, a week, a year? And your size and capacity of location is really, really gonna kind of hit that. Um, so there are questions flying in left and right. I
Yes.
love it. I'm gonna go to a couple of them here. Um, and one of them is around energy. And I think Todd brought this up. This is really, really good. And we're thinking broadly about, sauna and cold plunge and bathing establishments they use a lot of energy. We're heating and cooling a lot of things all the time. Um, and so I think one of the questions there is how do we think about lowering our carbon footprint as builders and
Hmm.
designers of spaces? How do we think about managing the volume of consumption that also that's an impact on the P&L, right? Your electric bill, your all those things are inputs. Talk a little bit about ways in which we're sort of designing around energy consumption and how to think about those things as a business owner.
Yeah, it is true by the very nature of sauna and cold plunge. They do use a lot of energy. You're trying to make a spot really hot or really cold. Um, and the the friend that you have in a commercial setting is basically steady state. So if you can get a thing to temperature and keep it there, that takes less energy than cooling, heating, or heating and then it cooling down and then heating and cooling down and heating and cooling down. So an example would be if you have an undersized stove in a commercial space and it is always fighting to keep the temperature up, and you have, and particularly if you don't have a lot of thermal mass in your sauna, you know, people open the door, heat goes out the door, uh, people come in, that stove is running full out to try and catch up over and over and over again. That's going to use more energy than a hot room that has a lot of thermal mass to it that's basically acting as a battery. And so you heat that up, it does take longer to heat it up. But if you then have 12 hours at temperature, if you've heated a lot of objects up, you know, whether that's wooden walls or it's stones or it's tile or whatever, um, the maintaining the temperature at that level is going to take less energy overall than sort of that yo-yo effect. Um, so that's something to think about, and that also affects the longevity of the equipment. So if you have something that's always running at maximum capacity, that's not going to last as long as a thing that's sort of humming it along at a sort of relatively reasonable percentage of its max. Um, the other thing to think about from a design point of view for that is ventilation, but also layout. Um, we see a lot of places people don't want to have they want to have a hot room that opens right to the outdoors. Um, and that there's a lot of experience reasons you might want to do that. But from a thermal point of view, it's not a good idea. It is good to have sort of a vestibule there that's going to buffer the air. Um, and just like you would in a commercial building, there's two sets of doors to keep your heat or your cold inside. That's a simple thing you can do that makes a huge energy impact.
Yeah, and that vestibule can always then also open to the outdoors eventually.
No, you
But it
never go outside. You lock people in a maze of energy protection.
the heat
Yes,
labyrinth.
I- indeed.
So when we're thinking about Sean's asking a good question. He says, speaking of duty cycle, are there typical equipment refresh standards for major components? Woods, lights, stoves, understanding that's dependent on what materials you use, the build and the use cycle. Do you have any rules of thumb, Joel, for kind of the way you're thinking about that? You know, how often do you refresh the wood benches on a commercial sauna or a hot room? How often should we anticipate stoves needing regular sort of maintenance? I think sometimes people come in and they say, cool, let's build a thing. We'll send the people in, we'll clean it every now and then, we'll mop the floors, and this thing will run on autopilot. Is that realistic, Joel? And how should we think about it if not?
It is not realistic, Justin. Uh, the there are on your major components, you know, you're you're going to want to have a maintenance schedule that includes replacement of critical components. Um, and then you're going to want to have a full replacement schedule depending on um, depending on sort of your use case, how hard stuff is being used. But in a heavily used commercial facility with electric stoves, we're typically recommending replacing the elements on electric stoves at least yearly. Um, and that's going to help keep that's going to avoid electrical safety issues, but it's also going to avoid your sauna going down when you don't expect it. um, on wood stoves, those chimneys need to be cleaned. on a regular basis. And then you also have to, unfortunately, wood stoves in commercial settings, they do wear out. Um, the even, we've used almost every brand out there. And the fact is that having a burning hot fire in a steel box for 12 hours a day will eventually burn through that steel box, and you got to pay attention. You got to be inspecting it. You got to make sure you're replacing it when necessary. Um, so that's on the heat side. There's maintenance required there and occasionally replacement. Um, and then in terms of how you treat the inside of the space, the wood, the benches, the walls, um, you do want to design around being able to clean. Um, there, we have a couple of guys out in Brooklyn right now installing what's going to be the largest hot room in the country, we think, uh, for Othership. Um, and there they had a really specific brief about how they clean their benches every day. And we had to design around that. So they sort of flip up and you can hose them down. The whole thing's designed so that there's not nooks and crannies that are going to collect schmutz. Um, and that's really smart. Um, and then there's also from an aesthetic point of view, every X amount of time, they're probably going to want to sand those benches back down, make them look brand new. And you want to design them so that's feasible. Um, so it's uh, really any commercial space, you just think about a commercial door on the front of a store, opening over and over and over and over and over and over and over again every day. Thousands of openings a day is pretty different from your front door at home that gets opened, five or six or maybe 10 times. And your door at home isn't going to need to be painted every year. It's not going to need the hinges oiled. It's not going to need a closer. It just is facing a different use case. Whereas if you want your store to keep looking good, you're going to be repainting that door. You're going to be maintaining that door. You're going to be replacing components from time to time. So that's an important thing to think about in terms of your financials, is just building in being able to keep that space safe and pretty and functioning well is going to take some investment over time.
Yeah, and I mean, underline that point there, Joel, is that regular cleaning and maintenance goes so far into all these things continuously staying nice over time. And we sort of know this, right, about our car. Like you drive a car, the more you maintain it, the longer it's going to run generally. And it's similar for this. And I think everybody asks, like, how do I manage this between sessions? What's my daily cleaning? What's my weekly routines? And what's my like deep clean at certain intervals? And then you're adding sort of this maintaining layer on that. And I just want to say the more you invest in those areas of keep the space looking beautiful, the higher likelihood that that will continue to look beautiful for years and decades down the road. I just got back from Finland and I was in a couple saunas there that like there's beautiful patina and worn inness. And it isn't just like patina marketing spin. It's like, oh, this has aged really well. This is how it should look after decades of use. And you also get in ones where you're like, oh, this is dingy and dank and musty and smells gross. And nobody really wants to be in here. And I would argue that most of the places like the sort of YMCA or the gym, they aren't thinking about this in such a it's an amenity. It's off to the side and in the corner, and people sort of forget about it until it's broken and then they have to fix it. And for most people who are on the call, I just want to stress that if this is core to your business, the downtime of this going down is real in terms of your numbers and your revenue. When the Joel was mentioning electric sauna heater elements, um, we always have them on hand because if and when they burn out, because that happens, they're built in the system to be replaceable because that can happen. You don't want that to happen in the morning on a day where you have 100 people ready to show up there and pay you money to be a part of that experience. So getting ahead of that with maintenance, regular checking, taking a look at those, and having somebody on your team who's kind of handy, who sort of gets it, who understands machines and how things work, it really pays off because even just in stress level of when the emergency happens, it is so rough when you're like, oh my gosh, the thing can't heat up. We're trying to give people a sauna experience and we don't have a warm space. It looks bad as a business. Like that's not what we want to be serving our people. So I'm underlining regular maintenance, regular cleaning. It's going to win for all of you. Joel, we got tons of questions to go to. We're going to keep getting to them along the way. I do want to flip a little bit. If we sort of look in the opposite direction here, we talked about design principles. What are the most common mistakes you see? What are the things that sort of people maybe get wrong, don't think about on the front end, kind of have blinders to? Let's riff on that for a little bit, and then we'll come to some of these questions that keep flying in too. What's your big mistakes you see most often when people approach these projects?
Yeah, I think probably the first one is just not thinking through customer flow. Um, and so if you say, oh, I'm going to have 12 people, I need 12 seats in my sauna. Great. Well, how many people are going to arrive at the same time? And how many changing stalls do you need? This is a mistake we've made ourselves. Uh, we're still trying to remedy. But we see this one all the time. Um, because you didn't think about how people sort of pulse through the space, you didn't think about, you know, where where do people need to change? Maybe didn't think about where people need to put their stuff in the winter if they have boots and coats. Where's where are those things going to go? Um, if you're going to have a laundry basket for towels to go into, where are you going to put that? If you're going to have a water station for people to get water, where's that going to happen? Um, and the if when people are done and they need to sit down and sort of they're all relaxed, they need to put their clothes on, get their boots back on, where are they going to do that? Is it going to be right where the next group of people is trying to come in? And so you really want to think through your flow of people sort of in time and space. Um, and just be really, everyone's always talking about, well, what's the number of top bench seats? But that's the easiest one. It's all these other numbers and how they fit together that's going to make, you can have the most beautiful sauna in the world, but if people are standing in a huddle trying to get in and out, that's really going to change the experience they have in your beautiful sauna. Um, so that's the first thing is really thinking through the flow. Um, the second thing is the second thing I think is really thinking about quality, um, quality for longevity. Um, and this is where, a residential and a commercial sauna from the outside look the same. And I saw somebody had a question about barrel saunas. Um, there's sauna tents. There's all kinds of, there's lots of stuff coming on the market right now. Um, and it may very well serve you really nicely in your backyard or to take camping once in a while or whatever. But if you start using it in a commercial setting, it's just not going to last long. And so that then becomes kind of a financial trade-off and amortization thing. Like, would you rather, burn through 10 residential saunas or have one that lasts you 10 times as long? And, how does the cost compare? So that's a thing. We do have, you know, the, we definitely have that experience with clients where they're so like, no, 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 it's going to be, it's going to be at an Airbnb or it's going to be like just a weekend thing with some paying clients. And then like before they know it, it's like, oh no, this is like an everyday, going concern. Uh, did we build it for that or not? Um, so I think that's an area where uh, it's just important to sort of be clear-eyed about that, that the cost of things and the quality of things is not always, but hopefully going to reflect how long that thing's going to last, um, and make sure you just have clear eyes about what the short and long-term costs are.
Yeah, and I would just add on that, Joel, you know, people are arriving at this call from probably a bunch of different vantage points of thinking about what commercial means in a commercial setting. And you just highlighted a couple, we have had numerous folks say, hey, we're going to do a hospitality business that is short-term rental, and we want a sauna there. The amount of time that people are spending that, it is multiple times, sometimes a day, but it is very, very daily usually. Um, and we have folks designing 20-person and up, big, huge sauna spaces. And we have folks designing sauna villages and saunas on boats, floating saunas, and saunas on wheels, mobile saunas. And all of these things are sort of deemed under the broader commercial umbrella. And your business model should also react to all these kinds of things. And I think one of the things I tend to see is people asking like, will the barrel suffice? Will the kit work? And usually, uh, my leaning is kind of to what you were saying there, Joel, is, you know what? What if you paid for a thing that would last a little longer and it was built specifically for that purpose? And what does your business model look like if this thing could continue to grow and host lots of people? Not how can you build the thing for the cheapest? Because usually what's going to happen there is you're going to really start replacing those things with shorter lifespans, kind of in the broadest brushstrokes. Um, and so there's definitely some thinking in that. I would also add on, Joel, just as a mistake I see kind of commonly is not thinking about broader accessibility and compliance. And so, one thing that as we get into commercial spaces, just for sort of an underline here for a lot of people, as you start thinking about this, you really begin to need to ask the question is how accessible all the way up to ADA compliance do you want your space to be? If you're tucked away 4 miles into the canyon, like Joel just said, at an Airbnb that this delivery was, there's probably a sense that you're not going to host a lot of people. And there's maybe a sense that you don't even need that space to be fully ADA compliant to the highest degree because it's so niche. If you're building a big bathhouse in a city and you have multiple units, we know that there's very clear ADA regulations on how to build sauna spaces, what transfer benches need to be at, what distance is there. And so the more people you're going to host and the more wide your net is, the more likely ADA is going to be a real important compliance factor for your design. Joel, would you add anything onto that around kind of ADA accessibility, getting lots of people in the door that would come up for you?
Yeah, as you were saying, commercial kind of encompasses a huge range of things, and that's definitely true. You know, this other ship project in New York has New York Health Department, New York City building codes. It's a whole other animal. Um, the but also, they're in smaller jurisdictions or smaller projects, you're dealing with the same thing. Um, and you need to the stuff that you can sort of get away with for residential saunas, where it's like, oh, it's an accessory building, no one's going to sleep there. It might not even need to be permitted. Um, for commercial, you need to make sure you're on the right side of those authorities in advance, and you know what they're going to expect. You know what they're going to require. You know what kinds of planning permissions you're going to need. Um, the other thing I would say about this and just commercial, when you're looking at larger spaces, so whether it's commercial bathhouse or it's, sauna in like a residential development or gym sauna, whatever, sauna at a yoga studio. Um, there one of the sort of forks in the road is, will I just have my architect and my GC draw this up and do it, or will we engage any specific technical expertise around sauna? Um, and that's an important question too. It's going to depend on the individuals you're working with. But unfortunately, it isn't just a hot room with benches in it. Um, there's a lot of other considerations around drainage and ventilation and vapor management and insulation. Um, that need to be really taken into consideration. So we do sometimes get handed these plans like, oh yeah, our architect drew this. And it's like, well, yeah, there are benches and a stove in this room, uh, but there's a lot more that needs to be thought about. And we'll often get that call then later from the contractor who says, yeah, architect drew this, but like, what do I actually do? Um, so that's for larger commercial spaces that becomes an issue, sort of different from the should I use a barrel or should I get, a stouter sauna? It's sort of that, how much technical expertise am I going to pay for to get built into this thing?
Joel, who are the kind of key players you'd see on a successful team as people are designing for some of these bigger spaces? You know, you mentioned architect. We love getting to work with architects because usually they know they don't have all the expertise in every area. You know, if they're designing a restaurant, they draw a big red square around the kitchen and they say the kitchen people do everything in there. We just stub out the utilities to it. Um, who are the kind of people that these folks are going to need on their team to really bring a project to life that has some scale to it, right? It might not be the V1 or just the little thing, the kind of starter, but if you're starting to think about scale, what are the kind of specialty expertise you want in your corner?
Yeah, I mean, the bigger a project, the more sort of cooks there tend to be in the kitchen. Um, the our other ship project, there's a whole contractor around lighting design. There's a whole contractor around sound design. Uh, there's HVAC. There's there's electrical controls. I mean, there's 1,000 cooks in this particular kitchen. Um, it's sort of more the medium sized projects where I think the it's not as clear. Well, do I need a specific sauna designer? Do I need a specific sauna builder? Um, can my GC or can my architect access some of this information? Um, I don't know that there's a super clear answer to that. Um, the uh, I mean, obviously we do it, but whether or not whether or not it's needed on any individual project, I think it depends. Is your GC somebody who's really interested in the details and is going to do some reading or call somebody like us um, and make sure they've got everything? Is your architect the right kind of architect? We work with architects who are like, hey, I'm going to specifically spec a ventilation fan with high temp grease so I know it will hold up to ventilation in this area. And then we have others who are like, oh, a fan? I didn't even think about it. And so there's just it really does come down to the individuals you're working with and sort of what their proclivities are, how interested they are in the details. And I think as a client, then it becomes up to you to just make sure, do I have the right kind of person on my team? Are the right questions being asked? Is the level of detail adequate? Um, and that's where getting somebody in who does have experience, who's used different fans, used different light fixtures, experimented with different types of foil tape for a vapor barrier. Just it gets down into the nitty gritty, but that's where finding somebody with experience, I think, does help.
Yeah, and I would add that you want somebody to be sort of a geek in this. You want somebody to like be excited about finding those answers and being ready to either ask the right questions or go down the rabbit hole and like really learn all the details because and I think this is where decisions get expensive. Um, the moment you use the vapor barrier that doesn't work, that isn't rated for high temp, the moment you use the polyiso or the types of insulations that begin to off gas in the hot room, the moment you have to just tear all the wall paneling off. And that is not a cheap, easy, or convenient sort of route when you've made a poor decision on specing, sort of 1 to 4 materials that maybe get used commonly in homes. Like a GC would say, oh, I use this all the time. And it's always asking that question of, is it rated for this specific use case? And we sometimes see the cowboys that say, yep, let's do a thing and we'll just do it fast and quick and we'll make it work for you. And usually that becomes more expensive down the road because you're actually solving for things that you didn't intend. we've seen this 10 days after opening because the benches aren't working the way they should. We're just trying to give you a little bit of heads up there. Um, I want to hit, there's so many good questions, Joel. I want to spend some of our sort of remaining time here kind of getting into those, and then we're going to land the plane here with everybody. We'll be quick on our hour, talking about the future. Also saying, here's what we see kind of coming in the future of public sauna in North America. But real quick, we have one. How do you avoid the sauna creating fungal problems? Oh my goodness. Water should go where it's supposed to go, and ventilation is not optional in saunas. You really, really want to make sure this place dries out nicely. You need to breathe. All the humans in there need to breathe. And this is a wet environment. And I think sometimes because people have seen this in the kit in the gym, just kind of set in a corner, people begin to miss those things. And I would add to that like level of just these are key components of your building up. You're on cultural bathing territory, bathing and washing and sweating and people that you want to make sure this place can handle water. No matter where it is, no matter how it's functioning, make sure water is of the utmost concern and thoughtfulness. Joel, would you add anything there as the resident plumbing expert and one who loves making sure water and pipes are done right?
Yeah, I think saunas are an incredibly extreme building science case. The building wall systems and roof systems having longevity has to do with uh, them staying dry over time. And in a sauna, if you're in a sort of conventional stick frame sauna where you do have a hard vapor barrier, um, your sauna needs to be able to dry to the inside on the interior side of that vapor barrier, and it needs to be able to dry the outside on the exterior side of that vapor barrier. So on the inside, that means having good airflow. So you've got vents in the right places. Um, it also means, depending on your climate, thinking really hard about your thermal mass. Um, it's really important. This is one of the sort of underappreciated things about stones in a sauna stove. They are there to make the heat more even, um, but they play a really important role after the session is over in keeping heat in that room while it dries out. And so you want to have enough thermal mass in there that the room is able to dry before it cools down to a condensation point. Otherwise, you're going to have water in there. Uh, After the heat's gone, you're going to start to grow mold. Um, on the exterior, the particularly with modern building materials, you have OSB, which is quite sort of moisture sensitive, and then you have people are getting into the more modern ones are more breathable, but house wrap can trap a lot of moisture as well. And so that space in between your foil vapor barrier and your house wrap, which is where the bulk of your wall structure is, it's easy for moisture to get in there. Moisture will get in there. Um, can it dry through the house wrap? And part of that has to do with, are you using best practices for cladding? Do you have an airspace behind your cladding? Um, and this stuff gets even more sort of um, more detailed and important in the roof. Um, but it really comes down to best practices around making a wall and roof assembly that can dry. And it is, if a normal contractor is used to working with, in our climate, there might be uh, as much as a 80 degree delta between the inside of the house and the outside. It could be 70 degrees inside and it could be -10 or even -20 outside in the winter. There's condensation points in the walls. How is that handled? There's a whole sort of um, convention around how to do that to make stuff that lasts. But a sauna, it could be 200 degrees inside and -10 outside. And that's incredibly, an incredibly big delta. You got to plan around it. Um, so that, yeah, avoiding avoiding fungal growth, it is both interior of the vapor barrier and exterior that you have to worry about. It's one of the I'll just make a plug for mass timber or for log saunas. We build most of our saunas out of mass timber. That's a vapor open assembly, so it can actually dry in both directions. You don't need a hard vapor barrier anywhere. And it's one of the reasons why mass timber saunas are so great for longevity.
Good stuff. Really good stuff. So as we think about more questions coming in, what are some things that business owners typically want in their sauna that can add a performance or longevity risk? Uh, this is from Kent. Joel, what's the
That's a
thing
good
that sort of
question.
people want, but they don't really want it, or they want, but it could pose a risk down the road, and you have to sort of know, you got to count the cost kind of on the front end. Is there anything that sort of jumps out into you for that, Joel?
Yeah, that's interesting. I work really hard to design things that are beautiful and simple and let the sort of materials shine. Um, and that uh there's sort of stupid simple stuff like if you put a mitered corner on trim in a hot room, it's not going to look good after 3 heat cycles. Um, because the conditions are too extreme. The wood's going to shrink and expand, and you have to design it a different way to make your trim look nice. Um, and I think a lot of the things we hear from clients where it's like, oh, I'm not sure about that. I might have to talk them out of that. Does come down to aesthetic things that um, where the thing that they want just isn't maybe going to have the longevity they want. So, we get a lot of like, look at this beautiful picture, make it look like this. It's like, oh, I'd love to make it look like that. And uh, there's too many tiny pieces on there that aren't going to hold up over time, or there's too many layers to that woodwork where moisture is going to get trapped in between the layers or whatever. So some of it, I think, is letting the form dictate over the function. Um, having not having a changing room because you want that like stepping right out into the woods experience. Great. Well, you know, this thing will perform better and more efficiently if there is a little vestibule. Um, so it's things like that. Um, I do think people are generally speaking, and this is just, this is true of everything in the design world. People come in with a look they want first, um, and a function they want second. Not in every case, um, but I think it's important to make sure that you let the function, influence the form.
I would I would add that the other common thing that I see that's the sort of mistake is it's actually an operational question. It's forcing or allowing more people to be in the space than what it's really designed for. And you kind of brought this up earlier, Joel. During your peak times, it can be a lucrative business in some ways. Like it is, if you're doing it right, you can get a lot of people into these spaces. Um, and if you're looking for a high quality experience, you don't want people often crammed into a space. And as we're in design conversations, I think one thing that's really important is, does your business model allow for enough bodies that the business works without it being sort of cramped? And why I say it around sort of quality of experience, it also starts bumping into, hey, can you just put the benches closer to the heater? And those are rules that like we're sort of like, no, like these are actually hard and fast lines that we can't make it closer to that because it's going to be a liability risk, it's going to be a safety risk. And I do hear that often from folks that are saying, I want the most out of this thing, give me the max amount of people in there. And usually it's the issue of, I'm putting too many people in, or I'm trying to get too many seats in a room that really shouldn't have that many seats. Um, yeah. There are
Yeah,
so many good ones. Go ahead, Joel.
it's a funny thing, I think, how many people is too many people depends on the relationship between the people. So the, if you have public sessions, where it's strangers, they're not going to want to sit that close together. But if you're dealing with like a private session or a buyout of the facility or whatever, it's a group of friends at a birthday party or whatever. It's like, oh, they want to be all cozy and up in each other's business. Um, and that's fine. One of the things I think we learned kind of the hard way is we always now design benches to hold the absolute max number of people that you could squish onto there, uh, in the most extreme case, even if everything else is designed around a more spaced apart capacity. We had one commercial we sold. It was like, it's a 7-person sauna. There will only ever be 7 people in there. And then uh, our client was putting 14 people in there every single session. Well, guess what? We didn't make the benches strong enough for that, and we ended up having to go down and rebuild much sturdier benches. Um, so part of it is you want to build it for the extreme, but then yeah, you do want to just make sure that your numbers are right in terms of setting your expectations and having your business model work.
Last one here before we give a couple of little details onto the future. Emily's asking this question. Jordan's asking a related question. There's another one in here. It's basically around code. It's around compliance. It's around ADA rules and regulations. How do you navigate that? What are the common ones? I'll say a couple things, and then I want to hear from you, Joel. I'll say first is that you will be an expert of this more than anybody in your municipal town planning department around how sauna should work in the public sphere. So it's actually on you as the business owner to get very educated on this and anticipate the questions they're going to ask. It's a big deal when your fire marshal comes in and you have a document that's your 5-page document on fire safety and suppression. We've written that for us because we say, hey, we care. We want people to be safe. Here's our policies. Here's our plan on it. When we decided to put a cold plunge in Lake Superior and kept that from ice from forming there, we have a 9-page document that's about how people safely get into and out of cold water. And you could sort of like push that through and make that happen, maybe. But your insurance companies, your regulators, your people in your town, council, municipality, all those people, if you're caring about human safety, usually they're going to be more on your side than if you're trying to get around the rules or if you're trying to sort of find the right loophole. And so I would say if you can cast a good vision for what you're trying to do as a business and you care about the process, I've found a lot of people who are those sort of rules and regulations people not being huge barriers, but being the kind of people that are like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited that this is happening in our city, our town, our area. Um, but it's on you as the business owner to be able to communicate that really, really clearly. Now, I've seen other examples where it is people don't understand, and there's one person who is the decider, and you get on their wrong side, and they will never approve you for a thing. Um, it's not often, but I've seen some of that around wood-fired stove regulations in a number of states with burn bans. We brought up New York. New York has really strict regulations around operating these type of facilities. So there's a lot of homework that needs to be done specifically on your area. There is no nationwide code on cold plunge. There is no nationwide code on sauna. There's general rules, and then there's how people interpret the code. Joel, would you add anything there around sort of getting through the red tape and or the legal and rules and regs to get your business open?
Yeah, I think because this is a relatively incipient industry, it's expanding fast. The local codes have not caught up. So a lot of towns, they don't have a license category for a public sauna. Um, they don't have a license category for a mobile sauna. They don't have a license category for, whatever it is. And then that does raise then more risk. It's especially at the local level where, sort of one quixotic person can sink your can sink your project. Your friends in that situation are going to be coming armed uh, with code related resources from sort of higher authorities. So if you can bring in, and Justin, you would know sort of what the particular entities are, but like, hey, here's the code in, X larger town, that how they deal with it. Here's the best practices for fire safety and wood fired saunas from the Sauna Society. Here's whatever. You could sort of bring them those resources, um, and in a sort of nice and humble way, um, sort of say, this isn't the first time this has been done. um, but yeah, it is true. When you have a code problem, it usually comes down to an individual inspector, and then you got to be creative about sort of how you get them onto your side. I see that question about capacities, uh, letting enough people in the business, um, the without knowing more, without knowing more details. It's hard to say, but there's going to be sort of occupancy codes in any given jurisdiction that you're going to need a local architect who knows the code officials to help work through. Um, and then you're going to need to bring them sort of the specific uh, authoritative information about safety and saunas and so on, so that they have kind of a reference point. Otherwise, they're saying, well, this sort of matches this model or this model, or and then you end up with an answer you don't like.
You guys, there are too many questions. We really love to see the ways that you guys are geeking out on this stuff with us. We might have to do one of these again. I will point you to a couple of resources because we do this stuff all the time. We think about this stuff all the time. One is that we do design and build these kinds of things all the time. So if you are looking for somebody who fits that weird geek out with you box on the thing, we'd love to consider that with you. We'd love to get you with our design team and start talking about what would it look like to do a bespoke build. We have architects and designers on staff. They would work you through the whole process of understanding all these things, and then also asking the question of who's going to build it. And sometimes we do that. Sometimes other folks on site do it if it's a bigger project. Additionally, if you're asking sort of business related questions, check out our Sauna Business Accelerator. We work with businesses all the time that are sort of fine tuning how to get these things open in the world. And those are key areas for us where we don't want to just be the builder. We actually have so much industry knowledge and expertise with team members of ours, is we are working with folks through a program to say, hey, let's open your business, let's get it funded, let's solve all the hurdles and roadblocks along the way. So we'd love to sit alongside you in those areas too. Before we sign off, Joel, what does the future of sauna look like in North America? Are there any takes that you have? Are there any things that you're seeing coming just over the horizon or on the horizon that you might want to mention to these folks as we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, I think, if you look to the Scandinavian countries, um, they know how to make saunas that last. They know how to solve the problems around customer flow and all this. They got the function part dialed. And as a consequence, there's so much innovation on the aesthetic side and on the experience side. Just absolutely gorgeous locations, you know, beautiful creative architecture. Um, and so my hope is that we sort of are heading that way too. Um, that in America we don't screw it up too badly with poorly designed saunas that don't work. We use the information that's out there, and we're building functional saunas, and then we can also start to focus on, the saunas in Scandinavian countries. They're really like critical public spaces in gorgeous locations. Um, it's just sort of an amazing way of experiencing art and beauty, as well as having this experience in your body at the same time. And I'm sort of hopeful that that's the direction that we're heading as well.
Yeah, and to dovetail off that, Joel, I just think that we are so ripe for more creativity in the market, for more types of business models. We say that not because we haven't figured it out, but because I think there's a lot of creative freedom now in the US and North America broadly. The US is really bad at resting and slowing down. And these businesses are designed to kind of be counterculturally helping people connect with each other, slow down, get in their bodies, rest, when so much of our life is on screens, uh, distractible. And we're seeing that growth from all over because people need it right now. And they're going to need it in lots of new spaces. And it won't just be the big immaculate bathhouses. It's also going to be the small sauna tents that get popped up and sort of started real quick, the mobile sauna fleet that gets brought, the floating sauna in beautiful location X, Y, and Z. And so I encouraging to folks who are working on these projects and who are starting to open doors. Um, the market isn't saturated yet. Don't worry. The 20 people in that you're looking for in the sauna, there are plenty more out there who are going to come. And so to one of the questions, how does future thinking, future vision of your space expansion and design relate? I would say kind of have the master plan, have the big vision. I always ask people, what if it works? Not what if it failed? Like, what if the thing you are working on actually will grow? Make space for that too, because you might need the second location, the additional sauna, the new add-on to the space if things go really well. Joel, thank you for all your expertise, for being here with us, for being with all these folks. Everything's going to be recorded, so if you want to check out kind of the recording and watch again, feel free. And then also, Joel, just thanks for all the detailed work here. And maybe some of these folks we'll be talking with more and solving problems right alongside them. But really appreciate you taking time out of your Northern California morning to hang out with us and everybody here.
Oh yeah, it's fun, and thank you all for joining us. It's really fun to hear the questions and um, just to know that there's people really all over the world uh, trying to figure out how to make beautiful saunas that really work well for people, and it's just fun to be a part of the conversation.
All right, you guys, thanks for being here. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. See you guys.